I'm Julian Minensone. The preseason is finally over. Time for some real football. We'll talk about it here next on the Titan Squad Show.
I'm Brad Hopkins. They should write a song called 2 Weeks to Denver. I can't wait, and I know you can't either. We'll talk about it.
Tighten up. It's the Titan Squad. Sponsored by Gametime. Everything Tennessee Titans every week. Covering all the big hits and game-changing plays from the heart of Music City. The way only the Locked On Podcast Network can. Squad up. The Titan Squad Show starts now.
And welcome to the Titan Squad Show, the morning after edition of their preseason finale. Titans get the win over the Minnesota Vikings 23-13 in that final preseason game, the only preseason game they played at Nissan Stadium. As you heard off the top, I'm Julian Minensone. That's two-time Pro Bowler Brad Hopkins. And Brad, preseason is over. Almost time for that real thing. Real football's coming our way soon.
Yeah, we heard Cam mention that, the fact that now that the preseason is in the bag, a full regular season game is on the horizon. And I'm excited to see it. I'm excited to see this next version of Cam Ward that has a game plan, that has studied his opponent. I mean, he's already alluded to what a good contest this is going to be against a really stout defense in the Mile High City. So I'm just like you, man. I'm ready to see this next evolution of Cam Ward into what's going to be, the face of their franchise ultimately.
And we're going to dive into that and kind of reflect on the preseason as a whole, what we saw in the finale here coming up. This episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. Good deal. All right, B-Hop, I got to say, man, I really like this Cam Ward guy. I think he's made of the right stuff. I think he's checked more boxes than he hasn't this offseason. Of course, we've talked about like the leadership stuff, right? The 5 a.m. workouts, the trash talking with the vets, but then also earning their respect. And then, the results on the field. Last night, they come up empty on that first drive, but that second drive, they went the length of the field on that one. Is we going to go look at the was it the final numbers on that drive? Was it a 90-yard drive, 8+ minutes?
Mm-hmm.
Man, it was balanced. He found different receivers. They used the running backs. I mean, what did you make of Cam's performance specifically last night? Last night, he goes 3 of 4, 36 yards, but then leads him to a touchdown.
Julian, I like how he overcame some of the things that, obviously weren't going right for him in that first drive. You throw an incompletion, maybe you experienced a little bit of pressure. We saw him escape the pocket. But for the most part, he just stayed consistent, And I think that one thing that Callie reminded us of was 2 15+ play drives, 15-yard plays in that drive, explosive plays, right? You want to have those. Those are the ones that make the difference. I mean, sure, you can dink and dunk and nickel and dime everybody, but at the end of the day, you got to have explosive plays like the one that Brandon Allen and Van Jefferson connected on. Right. So while we're talking about Cam, I understand that, but you should see more of that potential, right? Because that speed on the outside there is one of the reasons why I made it attractive to bring Van in here, even though he's on his third team. He has that capability. He has that track speed, in essence, But for Cam, the thing I noticed most about him was what? No turnovers.
Yes.
You know what I mean? No turnovers, no fumbles, no giving it to the defense. So, he's really being cognizant of what his role is, which is to not be a liability on this offense. It's matriculating the ball down the football field in a form that sounds like he's patient, that he's under control, and that he understands exactly where he's going with the ball and what the defense is giving him. Because that's one thing that young quarterbacks tend to forget is that, hey, look, man, you got to take what the defense gives you. And he's been doing that through the 3 preseason games that we've seen.
Yeah, not trying to do too much. We've talked about it, I think, on the last show. You mentioned we have no catastrophic really plays there. Nothing that's going to shoot themselves in the foot like we saw quite a bit last season. I mean, even in that first drive where they came up empty, where he's kind of flushed out of the pocket and then he found a way to get out of bounds, he didn't make a bad situation worse. You don't let a broken down play turn into a bigger mistake and then you're in a worse situation. Are you kind of surprised that he is that poised and that I guess relaxed and doesn't seem to be moving a million miles a minute out there so soon?
No, because you do tend to see it. You tend to see it on those rookie quarterbacks, Julian, that make those strides and excel in year one. Did we say that about Jalen Hurts? No. Jaden Daniels? No. CJ Stroud? No. Patrick Mahomes? No. What's the common thread there? These are great quarterbacks. These are quarterbacks that have a mindset maybe of confidence, and maybe it's something that they've always had, right? But they're unflappable. You know what I'm saying? So I think Cam Ward is of that type. You know, I'm talking about a bunch of players that have had success. CJ Stroud has won the division. You know, Jalen Hurts has been to the Super Bowl a couple of times. Patrick Mahomes, I don't even need to mention Patrick. Jaden Daniels seems like he's on the precipice of being able to do those things consistently, right? Having the Washington Commanders be relevant. And it does seem like that kind of poise, that kind of confidence, that kind of patience, if you will, is one thing that that Cam Ward definitely possesses. So, yeah, I wouldn't expect him to when he was scrambling outside the pocket, scanning downfield for a player, and then ultimately just takes it out of bounds and not create a play, because he's patient enough to say, hey, look, you know what? I know that quarterbacks are usually a part of big plays, explosive plays, but I don't have to make one every single time I'm on the football field. And I'm going to go back to Will. I'm not picking on Will,
Right.
but I'm going to say, I think he felt it was his job to make something happen every single time. Well, you know what? Sometimes nothing's going to happen, and that's a good thing.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because you didn't give the ball up. But I can also understand like the sense of urgency that he felt to get that ball out of his hands and to get it into somebody's hands that can make a play. And we saw that be an issue more times than not, where it was a mistake to do that. Well, we don't see that here. You know, not yet anyway. Now, we don't have 60 minutes of Cam Ward in a game. We have a pass rush that's geared to befuddle him, that's designed to get those turnovers, to trick him into seeing certain things that he may not be seeing ghosts or whatever. And so it's going to be different once Denver and boy, he starts out, Julian, with a bear of an opportunity here.
What a test, huh?
Man, the Broncos are nothing to play with, man, and they're at home. So we're going to see a probably, well, obviously the newest version of Cam Ward, but we'll see what Cam Ward's made of, the metal he's made of, and what happens in that game. Whatever happens in that game, Julian, we're going to exaggerate it. Whether it was, him beating the Broncos at home, oh my God, we're going to the Super Bowl, or if it's, he got crushed by Denver at home, we're going to be like, this guy sucks. I knew we should have took Shador, that kind of thing. So, this is what's going to happen.
You mentioned a good point, B-Hop, about being okay with doing the boring stuff. And it felt like last year, again, I hate the comparison, the Will to Cam, comparing the ex-girlfriend to the new girlfriend kind of thing. But, it seemed like Will was never okay with just doing the boring stuff, not making a bad situation worse. And it seems like Cam is okay with that if it doesn't make a bad situation worse. Ward's preseason numbers, 10 of 19, 145 yards. Doesn't have a touchdown, but led 2 touchdown drives in this preseason. And also, like you mentioned, B-Hop, no interceptions. As far as between now and that first game, is there anything else you really need to see in these practices? Or is it more of just how he handles the actual game prep?
Well, yes and no. There's nothing I need to see, because if I can see it, then the Broncos can see it. And at this point, you're trying to put together the type of game plan that can get you that first win. And I'm going to say that it's not everything to come out of this winning the first game, but it means a whole heck of a lot. I think people understanding the circumstances. You're going into Sean Payton's house. He's got a second-year quarterback that did really good for himself last year. They've got a complement of good receivers. And that defense, man, it's going to be hard to stay on the football field. So we understand the challenge. But what I want to see from Cam is just continual growth. The mindset that he is the leader of this team and can lead them to the promised land, in essence. You know what I mean? And that's not a lofty goal, I think, for this team. You can set those kind of goals. I hope they all wrote it down, because if you write it down, you're more likely to accomplish it, right? Write down that we want to win the division, because winning the division gets you in the playoffs. You don't have to be the best team in the AFC. You just have to be the best in the division, or at least hanging around there to be part of the conversation. I don't think the AFC South is going to feature 2 teams in the playoffs, like some of these divisions that we've seen. But there definitely is an opportunity, because the Houston Texans, even though it might go through Houston, I mean, I don't see them beating the Bills, the Ravens, the Chiefs, the Chargers. So they're in there, but they're like, kind of down on the peg a little bit, which means that, hey, they're beatable. You know what I mean? Especially our track record against Houston and what that's meant. So this could be a very unique year for us to take a step forward in making a name for ourselves in the AFC South, and it starts with number one.
Exactly. And it's a division where, B-Hop, there is a good chance that Cam Ward, if all goes well, ends up being the second best QB in that division by the season end. I mean, This is kind of a prove-it year for Trevor Lawrence, is it not? And I know, Stroud, it's kind of like, can you get back to CJ Stroud from what we saw when he first kind of came into the league? And then the Colts are obviously in their the debate of the Anthony Richardson, Daniel Jones whole situation. So there's a good chance. I mean, this division is not, at least right now, it's probably the Texans if you made a prediction today. But I don't think they have the firm grasp on the division like maybe a lot of people say. I think you could still maybe in another year or two become the powerhouse if you grow and develop your players the right way.
Yeah. I think CJ Stroud has set the bar, Julian.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Just with his accomplishments so fast. You know what I mean? Coming in as a rookie, second year wasn't as good, but still, it was they won the division, for goodness sake.
Yeah.
I don't understand why Trevor Lawrence isn't getting more pressure, because he was the first pick of the draft too.
Yeah.
And a guy that came out of Clemson. Not to say that Miami, what's up with these ACC quarterbacks coming to the South? Wow, what's up with that? But anyway, the point I'm trying to make is the fact that Jacksonville has struggled, and they're on. Well, this is their second coach since he's been there, right? Well, no, it's third coach. No, was he there? He was there with your boy from Ohio State, Urban Meyer. Wasn't he there with Urban?
Yeah, Urban Meyer. Yes, it was Meyer, right. Peterson, and then now Cohen.
Yep. So he's on his third head coach. So something is not jiving, And you'd think that there'd be more pressure on Trevor Lawrence, especially when he came in with such clout, But it's just not the case. But I do think that when you look around, I think that this team definitely is, we've had our successes against the Jags, and I'm not going to say that Liam Cohen is not putting together type of team, type of culture that has the same kind of mindset that they can win the division. But hey, this is going to be a great opportunity. I don't expect to have that happen in the first year, but I do expect them at some point in time to be a legitimate contender for this division, for sure.
This year, to me, whoever between those three teams, whoever kind of goes 3-1, I think is that's a step forward there, because the Titans went 0-4 against those two teams. The Colts, I'm talking about the Colts and the Jags last year. You just can't have that happen. Just can't have that happen one bit. Keep your comments coming, guys. We have a lot of comments already in the chat. We'll answer as many questions as you have. This is one that caught my eye here. Courtney Tyree Jones. I'm noticing we're actually getting the ball beyond the first down marker this preseason. We had a lot of passes being thrown below the marker last year. Van had that, you mentioned it, B-Hop. Van had that 17-yard grab from Cam. And then they had the Io Manor one for 13. And then the big one to Van from Brandon Allen for 65 for the touchdown. What are you seeing from, I guess, Callahan's offense and the way he's utilizing the personnel that he has?
Protection.
Yeah.
Plain and simple. Quarterback's got time to do their job. And Courtney, the reason why you're noticing plays beyond the first down marker is because the routes can be run that far before the quarterback finds them as a receiver, right? He has time to let these routes develop. He has time to let his guys go downfield, whether it's a crossing route, a go route, maybe a sluggo, something like that. Either way, they're getting time in the pocket. They're doing a really good job up front. I'm not going to get ahead of myself and say they've arrived and that this is going to be one of the best offensive lines in the league, but they definitely have improved that position. They're giving the running backs holes to run through, which also helps. I think your ability to run the football sets the tone, because if you're in manageable down and distances, then you can keep, converting first down by using the playbook more expansively, because there's not a lot dialed up for 3rd and 15. It's just not. But when you can stay relatively close to those down and distances where you can do a lot in the playbook, then hey, that's what it's all about. And it starts with the offensive line. Now, sure, we have seen Cam have to escape the pocket a couple of times, but this is the National Football League, guys. you got 4 seconds tops. And if their receivers haven't gotten open, then you're either going to eat it, or you're going to run it, or you're going to throw it away. You know what I mean? So those are the 3 options. And we've seen this, obviously, this preseason, the Cam has done a great job of protecting the football. And, for the most part, the other quarterbacks too. I think that, of course, Tim Boyle was the only one that threw picks in the preseason. He's no longer here. But
Sure.
We can definitely see that they've taken care of the football. And part of that is that not being under duress, being harassed, and kind of goaded into making the mistakes. So I think you're starting to see them getting past the first down marker because they have time to do it.
And we're going to talk to B-Hop about the offensive line and the running game here in the next segment when the Titans Squad Show returns. Keep it here. Keep your comments coming too, because we love that stuff. All right, this episode is brought to you by BetterHelp. These days, it feels like there's advice for everything: cold plunges, gratitude journals, screen detoxes. But how do you know what actually works for you? With so much information online about mental health and wellness, it can be overwhelming to figure out what's true and what will actually help. That's where talking to a licensed therapist through BetterHelp can make all the difference. You get real, personalized guidance instead of the guessing based on something you saw on social media. I've have a bunch of friends who actually go to a therapist, and BetterHelp is one of the better ones out there with over 30,000 therapists. BetterHelp is the world's largest online therapy platform, serving more than 5 million people. That's a lot. Take it out, or talk it out, I should say, with BetterHelp. Our listeners get 10% off their first month. BetterHelp.com/lockedon. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. All right, B-Hop, we're back. I wanted to talk about the offensive line with you because it should be in your contract that we talk about it every single show. That is your expertise. I'd be doing a disservice not to talk about the O-line with you. No Cushenberry, obviously he's coming back, which is a good sign. We didn't see him in the preseason, but he's working his way, ramping his way back up. Didn't see Kevin Zeitler either. The vet, 14 years. What else do you need to see from that guy? That guy's added a ton of experience to this O-line. But we've seen flashes of what this offensive line can be. It's obviously a priority when you draft a young quarterback. And they've done that over these last few seasons by giving Dan Moore, the left tackle, the $80+ million deal this offseason, bringing in Zeitler, having Cushenberry back, and then using some high draft picks with Skoronski and J.C. Latham over the last few years. It has... we have seen signs of some good stuff. As far as the offensive line, can they be what I think could be the strength and one of the better position groups of this team this season?
100%. The investment that you just laid out there, if you think about it, it's put together to produce some pretty good results. Dan Moore is an experienced left tackle, and not the most experienced. I think 5 years isn't like he's figured everything out. I'm sure there's a lot that he can continue to get better at, and that's why they have Bill Callahan, right?
Yeah,
to coach him up. Peter Skoronski has been a noticeable improvement every year, since 2023 when he came into the league. Last year he was working with J.C. Latham. They were trying to create the kind of cohesion that's necessary to be effective. Now they moved JC over to right, so he's got to do the same thing, but with another veteran in Kevin Zeitler. And the thing is, Kevin has that winning mentality because that's where he comes from. But he also has experienced the suck, if you will, in Detroit, right? Because they were part of some bad years when Dan Campbell first got there, but they saw it through. They made some coaching change or some quarterback changes, had done some really good things. So we know that he comes in here with a pedigree of knowing how to win. And I think that, Lloyd Cushenberry, up until the injury last year, was making strides to be the leader up front. He's the guy with his hand on the ball, the first player to have his hand on the ball, and he hands it to the quarterback. So his job is to basically get the play started, set the wheels in motion. And so I think that now once you see the regular season right on the horizon, all the pieces in play that they've acquired in the offseason are going to be there together now. We're going to see Lloyd on the field with Kevin. We haven't seen that yet this preseason. But good thing enough that they're both veterans that over the course of time, they'll be better. And I keep going back to that word cohesive. Cohesion means that they understand each other almost inaudibly. They can just look at certain situations that they've seen together, that they've studied together, and recognize how they're going to attack, that situation. And they've seen a lot of blitzes and stunts and really good players, and the things that that you need to experience to be an effective, consistent, efficient offensive line. So they got great coaching. I think they got good personnel. And I think at the end of the day, with Callahan's play calling, that'll protect them as far as like, hey, let's not do a bunch of stuff that, puts us at a disadvantage. You know what I mean? So I think ultimately they've done the right things in getting the right players, and now they're coaching them up. They're developing them into what they need to be, to bolster this offense, because that was definitely needed over the past couple seasons.
You know what I really like? That it seems that they're on the same page, even though all of them haven't played together in the preseason yet. But they're coming from like different mentalities of where each guy is at in their career. Zeitler's like the old head of the group, the experienced guy. So you have that box checked. You have the two young guys in Skoronski and JC Latham who are looking for that next step, that ascension into whatever, year 2 for JC. What is this, year 3 for Peter, year 4 for Peter? And then you have Cushenberry, who's healthy, coming back from an injury. And then you have Dan Moore, who's kind of in that prove it year, right? You gave him the $80+ million contract. And I think a lot of the talk was, is this guy worth $82 million a year?
Yeah,
well, yeah. I mean, you think about a position of need, and I know a lot of the fans were talking about, holy overpay, but there is such thing in the NFL. As we talked about, a bad team tax where you're 3-14, a position of need. And sometimes that's just the cost of doing business in the NFL, but you're paying the $82 million to protect Cam Ward's backside. And that's priceless to me.
Yeah. And the thing is, if you ask people in Steelers camp, they thought that Dan Moore might have been the liability up front for them. And a lot of times, Julian, we'll see a team that understands the value of offensive line play. They're not going to let those guys get out of the building. They're just not. You know what I mean? I'm not talking about myself specifically in that vein, but I never experienced free agency. If you think about me and Michael Roos and Taylor Lewan, we basically were the left tackles for this franchise for 30 years, if you think about it, almost. Well, more than that, because obviously I started in Houston, but there wasn't a lot of change. There wasn't a lot of turnover. Bruce Matthews played for this team for 19 seasons. If they got good offensive linemen, they tend to keep them. And if you're wondering why Pittsburgh made Dan Moore available, I hope we don't see why Dan Moore was available. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
At the end of the day, you just got to find that unit that really makes sense, that you're a good fit in, right? And I think at this point, at this phase of your career, you've gone through high school, you've gone through college, now you're in the pros. You can get better, but you're not going to be like night and day better. Because if you could have, what took you so long to do it? You know what I mean? So while his game may improve here, being in this unit, hopefully it will. We just don't want him to be. We don't want anyone to view Dan Moore as expendable because he just really wasn't worth that contract that the Titans signed him to.
Well, the good thing, at least with Moore there, at least the hope a few years, is Peters had a different guy on that left side for his first few years, and each of his first few years. And now you talk about the cohesion piece of this. The idea that Dan is going to be there, the hope is that Dan is going to be there for years to come, and that left side is set, and then they can have the B-Hop situation where we don't even have to touch that left side anymore. Yeah.
Well, let me say this. When this team was at its best and it had its successes, there was a Pro Bowler up front. Somewhere there was a Pro Bowler up front. You know what I mean? So which one of them is it? Is it going to be Dan? Is it going to be Peter? Is it Lloyd? Kevin? JC? Which one of these guys is ultimately going to be viewed by his peers as someone that's, probably one of the best at your position? And when we can say that, you'll start to see the results on the field, because no one's going to pick a dude just because he's got a good smile. They're going to look at him because he's been laying dudes out, because he's been playing lights out, because he's been doing all the things that bring about attention to an offensive lineman that will warrant him that kind of conversation, right? So I think ultimately when they decide to throw a Pro Bowler out there on the football field, or somebody acknowledges the fact that this unit is pretty consistent, they're doing some really good things, then that's when you'll start to see that translate into the wins and losses.
I wanted to kind of get to the next step of this, and you mentioned it. You mentioned the O-line in the first segment, but then the run game too, and how that goes hand in hand. One of the best things, I guess, you don't want Tajay Spears out, but we saw what some of the other guys can do. I mean, I think we kind of knew a little bit of what Julius can do being on this team already. You got more reps for Kal-El. And then, honestly, even the back-end guys, Mims and Jefferson, whether they make the team or not, or whether they're auditioning for somebody else, I mean, it seems like the running backs had a pretty good camp, and that was one of the shining stars of the offense throughout training camp so far. Bihab, what did you make of the running backs' performance, specifically maybe last night, but then as a whole over the course of this preseason?
Yeah, I think that by ranking, as far as like starter, backup, RB1, RB2, RB3, whatever else, RB1 and RB2 are already set. Even though Tajay Spears is injured, or obviously trying to get himself healthy for week 1, which he's got a couple of weeks to do, we know he's going to be Tony Pollard's backup. And we know that, just by listening to Brian Callahan, that they're probably going to inject him more into the offensive play calling than they did last year, taking some of the workload off of Tony Pollard, as they should. Tony's a really good back. And I think that he's, been somebody that we've leaned on as our best offensive player. Tajay Spears has been someone that has been versatile, not only in the run game, but the pass game. The unfortunate part is Khalil Mullings. I think I saw him last night. It looked like he popped his Achilles or something. Did you see that?
Yeah.
It's, I don't know what happened with that injury, and hopefully it's nothing sustainable, but, has Khalil Mullings done enough if he's injured and maybe can't go for, in practice a couple of weeks? Did he do enough to make the roster? Julius Chestnut, dude's hurling folks. You know what I mean?
I didn't know he had that in him.
Right. He's like a big body out here hurling people, but you know what I mean? So, when you look at just the competitiveness of that position between Julius, and of course, even Jordan Mims got some run too last night. It was all right. But I'm just saying, I thought that Khalil Mullings had done a really good job of stating his case to why he should make this team. You know what I mean? But Julius Chestnut has done some of the same things. Now, Khalil Mullings, the one thing I saw in value with him, Julian, was that he was on special teams. He made a tackle on kickoff.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So he's out there doing the things, separate from the offense, which we know is obviously his predominant position. Are we going to see Julius Chestnut on teams? We're going to see him covering kicks. Are we going to see him, blocking in the return game? What are we going to see from that? So Khalil might have got him a roster spot just because he does play on special teams.
Converted linebacker too.
And a converted linebacker. Think about that though. I'm glad you brought that up. That means that he has the understanding of both sides of the football. He understands gap responsibility. He understands maybe even how to read the defense and how they're flowing because he was on that side of the football. And as a former linebacker, you're obviously not adverse to contact, to the physicality, to that scrum, that pop. You know what I mean? Because you're bringing it from distance as a linebacker, and you understand how both positions work. So that's an advantage for him.
You think Tony Pollard is just seething at the mouth, ready to have those wide open gaps to run through with this offensive line when he comes when it's all like full one unit during the regular season?
You would only hope that the offensive line with better players in it can have the same kind of success that they had in the preseason, right? Yeah. And that was exciting to watch, man. We saw explosive plays in the run game, and Tony is probably like wringing his hands together, like, "Oh,
yeah, he's like Birdman in the window."
Exactly, exactly. What happened to that boy? Anyway, but then if you think about it, this can be a more balanced offense too, because while we're not looking at this receiving core as like the best, they are a really good unit. You know what I mean? And I love what happened with Van Jefferson.
Oh, redemption!
One minute he's the GOAT. He dropped the ball. We just cut him. You know what I mean? All this stuff. To what? To this guy having a game, right? He had a game, not just the touchdown run or pass, but even the intermediate stuff that he was catching.
That 17-yard reception from Cam.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So he showed you, hey, look, chill out on me. You know what I mean? I'm home. I'm with my peoples. You know what I mean? And that's probably one of the reasons why he had such a good game, because he's back in the Ville where it all started for him. Ravenwood products, making good. scoring touchdowns in Nissan Stadium. Doesn't get any better than that. Come on.
We're going to talk about Van Jefferson here on the other side and the receiving core as a whole. What do we need to see from them, if anything, before the regular season gets underway here when the Titan Squad show returns? Keep it here. All right, this episode is presented by Yahoo Fantasy. It's the best time of year. NFL kickoff is almost here, and that means fantasy football season is back in full swing. And this year, Yahoo Fantasy is turning things up with a fantasy football experience like never before. This year, me and the Titans Squad show are playing on Yahoo Fantasy, and you should too, whether you're a first-timer or a veteran making your millionth league. I have a work league. I have leagues with my buddies, and we all use Yahoo Fantasy. We've been using it for years, and the updates they're rolling out this month are wild, of course, in the best way. Now, to celebrate 28 years of fantasy football greatness, Yahoo Fantasy is dropping 28 big new features over 28 days throughout August. To kick it off, they just dropped Yahoo Fantasy Guillotine Leagues, a new killer way to play fantasy football on Yahoo, where the lowest scoring team gets eliminated each week until there's one team left standing. Now, with the season around the corner, now's the time to get your league together and give this new mode a try. If you're more into the classics, you can still play head-to-head private leagues or join a public league. Stay tuned for more killer announcements and start playing Yahoo Fantasy Football now at yahoofantasy.com/lockedonnfl. All right, B-Hop, you kind of teased it at the end of that first segment. Van Jefferson, the revenge game. He was crucified after dropping that beautiful pass from Cam Ward against Atlanta, but he makes good on that and does it in front of the home fans to boot. Van Jefferson, 3 catches, 102 yards, and then, of course, the 65-yard catch and run from Brandon Allen there, leading the Titans to a victory. Is there a better feeling than when that happens, when you know stuff's being talked about you on social media from the fans, and then you kind of make good and all make up, and, hey, we're okay now?
Well, it wasn't a problem for Cam, right? And actually, it wasn't a problem for Van.
Yeah.
It was the fans' expectation of what they wanted to see. They didn't want anybody messing up Cam Ward's potential of being great, right? So if you drop a ball that we saw from the backside seemed catchable, hey man, you screwing up our quarterback, man. Get him out of there. You know what I mean? That just shows you the level of love that they're already starting to have for Cam Ward. They don't want anybody screwing it up. In other words, let's flip it to position. Brandon James, what's his name? Hold on a second. I'm looking up his name real quick. He's one of the interior. Oh, he was a center last night. They gave up a sack. I almost got it. Brendan James. We got him from the Chargers. He got beat like a drum. Now imagine him in that lineup and getting Cam Ward sacked a couple times. There would be a witch hunt. They'd be like, dude, are you serious right now? You better get his butt off the field. And that's the way they thought about Van when he dropped that ball, right? But then when you show exactly what your potential is, and listen to what Brian Callahan said. Brian said that Van's having what? A great camp.
Yeah.
And that was indicative of that last night with the 3 for 3. You know what I mean? Doing his thing. So ultimately, he wasn't listening to the white noise. He wasn't listening to our fodder about who he was as a player and how expendable he is. He just went out there and did his job, and he did his job well last night. So the thing is, hopefully that's an indicator of what's to come, because we know that Van Jefferson will not be leading this team in receiving, because they do have a Calvin Ward, They do have a Calvin Ridley. Oh, that's
They're basically the same person. They're hand in hand. It might be Calvin Ward.
Calvin Ward. We just discovered something, Calvin Ward. But anyway, Ridley, Lockett, these are experienced guys with success, and we would have imagined that, especially Tyler in that slot position, he's going to be a favorite for Cam, right? Because we know Cam likes to get that ball out of his hands. He likes to have it, jump out of his hands into the receiver so they can do something with it. The timing will be there. Calvin, he's shown big play potential in his 3 for 3, 50 yards in game 2, I think it was. And Van shows some explosive play potential there. So that's just the starters. We haven't even mentioned maybe the role that Chigakonkwo and Gunnar Helm are going to hold in this offense, right? And then throw in there the running backs. Tajay coming out of the backfield, Tony Pollard running between the tackles. There might even be a Julius Chestnut or Khalil Mulling sighting in there at some point in time. So they've got a lot of dudes that can help Cam, can help get things going. So bringing this back to Van could be a nice compliment to a really good receiving core that may be keying in on slowing down Calvin Ridley and then allowing him to make explosive plays because he is getting that single coverage, right? Maybe they're rolling the safety over the top to make sure number 0 doesn't get an opportunity, and it leaves number 11 wide open out there in a one-on-one. You know what I mean? And maybe that's something that they plan for. Hey, Calvin, they're going to double you over here because they're running that cover 4. They're playing off the line a little bit because they know that we're going to run an explosive play here, and I'm keying you. Oh, but it's the Van Jefferson. Ha ha, sucker. You know what I'm saying? So that's what can happen.
Amar Al-Harris says, when the Rams won the Super Bowl, he had over 800 yards receiving. So Van definitely has potential, and he showed up last night. He can hit the home run hitter. Now, your son, Bryson, was teammates with Van. Has he ever talked about Van Jefferson, the professionalism or the kind of player he can be at all?
Can't stand him. He said he'd punch Van in the face. No, I'm just kidding. But think about this. They played against each other in school, too. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
In high school, so really good kid. I've always liked him. And obviously he's got a pedigree. Pops played. You know what I mean? So I think ultimately we don't just sit around and talk about Van Jefferson's game. It's just, Van had shown potential, and sometimes opportunity kind of slows that down. He was on an offense with not only Cooper Kupp, but who's the other kid? That's Puka Nacua.
Yeah.
So, and then of course he goes to Pittsburgh, or what was it? Was it in Pittsburgh? Yeah. I mean, they needed some help, but either way, he's now got an opportunity here to really make a name for himself. You know what I mean? To be home and be happy.
That does play a factor in it when you're comfortable around the place that you grew up and your football roots kind of started, and how much that certainly helps you don't have to get acclimated to a new area and the people and the culture, which does have an impact on the daily life, which does have an impact maybe on your preparation and things like that.
When you were dreaming about being a pro, your head was on the pillow not that far from the stadium you're playing in.
Yeah.
Think about that. If you're lucky enough to play for the team, first off, even growing up in a city that has an NFL team, and then you ultimately end up playing for that team, and you're making plays, and you're doing all the things because you know everybody, and guess what? You're like Bryson playing in LA. He didn't have the entire Nashville nation going to LA to watch him play. You know what I mean? But they do here. I mean, think about it. Cam gets to play in front of his high school buddies. I'm sure that there's not that many Ole Miss fans. I mean, I'm sure that there's some Ole Miss fans that, live here in Nashville that got to watch him play when he was, going down to whatever the thing is. What's that? The Grove, right? So, there's a lot of familiarity with who Van is as a player before he got to be professional. And I think that his comfortability, his familiarity, his understanding of the city itself and how things work here, just make him an easy fit.
My question is, Cam made a bold statement recently after one of the practices that the joint practices in Atlanta, I believe it was, where he said he feels like they have a top 5 receiving core. I personally wouldn't go that far. I know a lot of fans that, coming into this training camp, there were a lot of questions beyond Calvin Ridley. What could Van and Tyler Lockett give you? What will the rookies Chim Dike and Alec Iomanner look like? And while B-Hop, I do not think they're a top 5 receiving core, to you, have they answered questions from what you've seen, any questions you've had from what you've seen this offseason from the receiving core and what's the weapons around Cam? Mm-hmm. You have better clarity on that position group at least?
To a degree. In the preseason, you're just asking them to go out there and compete. You know what I mean? It's not a real concerted effort because you're not trying to put a bunch on tape that people can start studying about you. But let's just see how it looks with the real concerted effort to put together a game plan that takes advantages of the deficiencies on the other side of the football. And I think that we'll see that. I think that, when you look at Brian Callahan, I know that he might not be the most veteran play caller, but he understands and has worked with some very talented players to put them in the right position. So I think that you'll see that to be consistent. And then with them trying to attack what they need to from the opponent's standpoint, now we'll really start to see exactly what these guys can do. Now, what quarterback wouldn't say that his receiving group is what's, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Wouldn't it be weird if you got like, man, I sure wish I had some better dudes.
Yeah, yeah, we're gonna have the 22nd best receiving core in the league. Yeah, no one's gonna say that.
Where do you think? Where do you think your receiving core ranks? They're probably about 17, maybe 18. I mean, I think you'd have dudes standing at your locker before you got there.
Yeah,
Like, bro, what are you talking about right now? Seriously. But I do like the fact that he can confidently say that, because if you didn't think about it, if you didn't believe that to be true, just don't mention it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Nobody walked up to you and asked you, hey, where do you think that this receiving core ranks? Because at the end of the day, that might go back to the person that asked that question. Like, why the hell are you asking that question? You think that they're a top 5 unit, versus him coming up there and saying, hey, look, we're going to be a really good offense. And it starts with the guys I'm throwing the ball to. I think that they're a top 5 offense, receiving core. And if you say that, you believe that because no one asked you to say that. Right, you put yourself in that position to be judged or to be critiqued in what your assessment of your offensive unit is. But there might be some truth to that, because Calvin Ridley is a dog. Tyler Lockett is a dog. We'll see. Van Jefferson might have found his home, in 3 teams. Alec Ayumaner, I mean, the guys made some plays. Yes. We're looking at dudes that are really stepping up. Shoot, Bryce Oliver made some plays. With the in the second half with the other group. You know what I mean? So they got dudes that can, in rotation, make some plays. And if Cam has time, that's another thing. One thing that affects the receiver's ability to catch the ball is where he catches it, right, where it's thrown to him. And any quarterback with time in the National Football League can knock a dime off of the goalpost anywhere. You know what I mean? Because that's how good they actually are to make it to this level. But the difference is the big bodies up front giving the quarterback the ability, the time to do that, to have an accurate ball come out of his hands, right? To have time, to think about ball placement, because he has his receiver open and is making the connection, versus him running around all manically under duress and then throwing some ball at somebody's feet or over their head or, whatever. So it's a combination of things.
For sure. We'll keep the comments coming, guys. We had somebody say not top 5, but it seems serviceable. I would compare them to the Commanders wide receiver room last year. I guess
nice comparison.
Yeah. You have your sure bet number 1 guy in McLaurin, and Titans have their sure bet number 1 guy in Calvin Ridley, young quarterback. Maybe that was the missing piece. Cam has said this offseason, I believe I'm the missing piece to put this team in this offense over the edge. So I actually kind of like that Rice School right there with the comments, to keep those comments going. What do you think about that, Bihop?
I love your pronunciation of the names too. It's like these people or something. That's pretty cool. No, that's actually really good. I mean, that's a great comparison. You got Scary Terry that you got to throw some money at, because the guy has been their most productive receiver since he's been drafted to the Commanders, right? And he's seen a number of quarterbacks. There's consistency there. Calvin set a name for himself before he even got to Jacksonville. This dude was making plays as a Falcon. You know what I mean? So he's got that pedigree, and we know Tyler Lockett has been a part of a winning combination when he's up there with DK and they're up there making plays and doing things. So that's a unit that should be respected, to say the least. In other words, I don't think there's going to be a secondary that's like, we got this one in the bag. You know what I mean? We got nothing to worry about with these Titans. You know what I mean? Because at any point in time, somebody can turn something into a house call and make good.
Real quick, Bihop, what I really liked this preseason is that each game, it seems like they featured a different guy. Like that first game, it was Calvin Ridley. Obviously, he had that drive with Cam where he connected on the 3 passes. The second game, I know Cam didn't. It wasn't all Cam Ward because he was only 2 for 7. But you had that Ayumaner catch, and then of course Gunnar Helm was featured in the offense quite a bit because he's a receiver now too. You may not say receiver on the position group, but he's going to be catching passes. And then yesterday was Van Jefferson. And so I think that shows, featuring different guys could be a potential of what they could do this season.
Well, it doesn't allow defenses to key in on one particular guy, right? It's like, hey, 1 week is Calvin making plays. Next week it's Chig or Gunnar making plays. Then it's Tyler making plays. And if you can distribute the football to a number of different receivers, then it's easier to, it's harder for a defensive coordinator to say, hey, look, this is his favorite target. This is the guy he goes to all the time. When the play breaks down, or even in play calling, this guy has been the most productive. In other words, we don't want to see a huge range of productivity differences in these receivers. I don't want to see Calvin Ridley getting 90% of the catches. You know what I mean? I'd like to see him get maybe, 40%. Then you have between the other guys, they each get maybe, 10, 15, 20%. That way you're spreading the football around and not giving any true indicators. Unless Cam and Calvin are having the kind of year where nobody can stop them. You know what I mean? It doesn't matter. I mean, you can try and take Kelsey out of the game, but Patrick's going to find him at some point in time, right? Sure. That kind of combination. And, there probably are somebody that can be a pacifier for a quarterback like Cam to just be the guy that he can trust and go to when things get hairy, But for the most part, I like to see an even distribution, or at least the ability to move the football around and not just key in on one guy.
Absolutely. Okay, we're going to take a quick break and then have one quick final segment before we go for today. When the Titan Squad show returns with myself and B-Hop on the other side. See you then. Okay, so B-Hop. One of the more intriguing position battles has been that inside linebacker position.
Yeah.
With Cedric Gray, James Williams. If you ask me at the start of camp, I'd probably lean a little bit towards James Williams, but Cedric Gray has really come on of late. I think that running back that he leveled out last week is still trying to figure out where he is. And then, and he's made a lot of plays coming on really strong, and they really like what he's provided. Last night, Cedric Gray, had I think he had, a couple tackles last night, something like 5 tackles last night, right? But then, James Lynch gets in on the quarterback and provides pressure. Ball gets up in the air. James Williams comes down with the interception. And Cedric Gray, after the game, talked about the healthy competition between those guys, and they're both going to get opportunities. But where do you stand on it now as we're getting closer and closer to game prep and where these position groups have to get solidified?
I understand there is a competition between James and Cedric, but Cedric is leading this team in tackles. I mean, solo tackles for a reason.
Sure.
The dude is playing sideline to sideline. He's in the backfield. He's coming on the blitz. He is everywhere. Yeah. You know what I mean? And I'm not saying that James isn't making plays. I mean, hell, he came up with we gotta mention James Lynch too in there somewhere. Yeah. The newly acquired guy, because that guy was in the backfield. He was tipping balls at the line of scrimmage. He's doing
that interception. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. So let's mention him at some point. Give him his flowers. But Cedric, I mean, this dude kind of giving me shades of Mr. Monday Night. You know what I mean? of Keith. You know what I mean? Just coming and bringing it. I think that he's done a tremendous job this preseason of stepping out of. I'm not gonna say a shadow, because we'll see what Cody Barton is. He just got here, but Cody was making plays too. Yeah. So if you say the offensive line was probably an improved position this year, you've got to look at the linebacking core and say, hey, look, man, these dudes can definitely elevate the game of the defense as well, because tackling was an issue last year. Staying true to form and gap responsibilities and reading your cues was an issue. A lot of guys getting displaced, you know what I mean, and causing cavities that otherwise were hard to overcome. You got 2 massive dudes in T'Vondre Sweat and Jeffrey Simmons in front of you. There should be nobody getting to you. And I can't imagine when Cedric and Cody and all those guys are on the field with the ones, you know what I mean? With Sebastian and Sweat and Simmons and Keith. This is going to be a very formidable defense. So I can't wait to see how they compete in the conference.
Yeah, and Jeff Simmons got some action in the game. He told Callahan, hey, I want to play. And I think that says a lot about
got to tackle
the best player. Yeah. Absolutely. Somebody, Johnny Bucks actually has a comment here. James Lynch is a unit. I know you wanted to mention James Lynch.
Bro,
6'4", 295 B-Hop. That guy's a load. He's a fridge out there.
But the thing is, and I know that he's playing against his former teammates, which might have given him some extra motivation,
Yeah.
Or just the fact that he understands how to beat them, because he probably went against them in practice every single day, But he looked good. He looked disruptive, right? He looked, if you're going to try and block him one-on-one, he's going to win a few of those and get into the backfield. You know what I mean? So And from different places too. You know what I mean? So I'm not gonna sit here and be like, I'm like a huge James Lynch fan because this was the first sample size I really got to see of him. But this cat, first off, he's no slouch.
No,
6 years
absolutely.
experience, so he's been around, and I think that this could be a tremendous addition for Tennessee, as far as depth is concerned. I like him.
Absolutely. One last thing I wanted to ask you and get to in the show, B-Hop, is cut day is on Tuesday. Titans got to cut the roster down from 90 to 53. So that's a huge cut. It's just one big cut. This
That's what it is now.
Yeah. So being a player in a locker room when they had a cut day, right? Or when we were approaching cut day, from a player's perspective, how stressful is that locker room? Can you feel the tension? Is it talked about? Is it just kind of not unsaid but understood? What's kind of the feeling in a locker room right now as these guys have no more opportunities before that happens?
I'm going to try and sympathize. I understand the question. It's just never been my position.
Sure.
I was the 13th pick of the draft. I wasn't worried about making cut day.
That's why I asked about the feeling,
Yeah. I started as a rookie for 13 seasons. So that wasn't my mentality. Like, oh boy, I'm worried about getting cut today. Now, having said that, I understand how hard these kids work to get a roster spot. I understand the dreams that they had. You look at a guy that's a 6th round pick or a no round pick. They're not guaranteed to make the team, right? So you see them hoping and just wishing and working hard and doing all the things. And when it doesn't work for them, it's sad. I remember I had a running back. His name was Spencer George. We had, and really good player. I mean, just dedicated. He just loved football. And I remember him walking into the locker room with tears in his eyes. And he sat down in my locker and he's like, "They got me, B." And I felt every bit of his pain because I knew how hard he worked to make this team. And when they released him, it crushed him. Now, the silver lining is that there are 31 other teams out there. And depending on how well you performed in the preseason, it won't be hard for you to find another job. Matter of fact, somebody was in the chat talking about this kid from Seattle. Let me go back to him. He's a running back that he felt that we should get, and why would he become available? He become available because the Seahawks cut him, or he's on their practice squad, which means that anybody can put them to their active roster. You know what I mean?
So George Alani from Seattle. Yeah.
That's it.
Or Damian Martinez as well.
Yep. But the point I'm trying to make is, just because it might not work out for you here, it could work out for you someplace else.
Sure.
Then it is hard. It is hard to obviously put so much effort and blood, sweat, and tears into something and not having it happen for you. But that's how competitive the NFL is.
We asked Julius Chestnut this week, like, what's it like? And he's like, it's stressful. It's stressful. Yeah. And I asked him after last night, I asked him in the locker room, hey, do you feel like you showed enough? I think he has. I think Julius Chestnut's gonna make this team. But have you showed enough? You feel like you showed enough? And he's like, well, there's no more opportunities left. I hope so. Whether it's for, and he was candid, whether it's for here or that somebody else likes what I've done.
100%.
It's a real interesting thing in a locker room when it's a vulnerable position to be in with the players who their whole lives, B-Hop, are Mr. So-and-so of football in that specific state. And they've been told their whole lives, hey, you are the greatest thing. And then there's a moment of getting humbled a little bit or realization that, hey, the cards might not fall where they may.
Yeah, 100%. It's just, 2% of the people make the league. You know what I mean? It's just, and it's a fraternity for a reason, because there are millions of kids that dream about being professional football players. And, you see the league has only 2,000 people. So players. So it just shows you how competitive it is. But there are also other opportunities. So if Julius Chestnut doesn't make this roster, I think he's done a good enough job in his preseason for Jacksonville to pick him up, Indianapolis will pick him up, somebody maybe close that wants to understand a little bit more of the inner workings of our play calling. That could be also interesting. But I just, I like the fact that this kid has done enough on tape. Khalil Mullings has done enough on tape to afford them an opportunity, if not here, someplace else.
I think that's a good place to end there. Thank you guys so much for bringing the comments. I think the post-game comments are some of the best and the most we've gotten of this show that we started about a month ago. So we thank you guys for tuning in every single week here to the Titans Squad show. B-Hop loves reading all the comments from you guys.
I do.
And love getting the players' perspective. So thank you guys for doing that. Remember, you can get the Titans Squad show wherever you get your podcasts on audio and then here on video live on YouTube as well. But for now, I'm Julian Minnesone. That's Brad Hopkins. Ugh. Brad Hopkins. I should, I'm going to go do some laps and push-ups now after that one. Thanks, B-Hop.
Stop and give me 20.
All right, guys. We'll talk to you guys soon. Thanks for joining us.